My name is Grace Riley, and I'm reporting for the American Spectator. And today I have the privilege and honor of being joined by the former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. Mr. Speaker, thank you so much for joining me.
I'm delighted to do it. I remember very fondly coming to the college and being with you there.
Well, it was such a pleasure then, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to you again now. And I just want to begin by talking about your book, March to the Majority, The Real Story of the Republican Revolution, because in the book, you discussed many of the lessons that you learned. And it's important to note that the book is not only about the past, but about the future and the challenges that we're facing now. And you did what everyone said that you couldn't. You took back the majority, you led through that. And right now, we're in a situation where I think a lot of Americans have lost hope and are concerned about the future of our country. What advice would you offer, or what are some key lessons that you learned back then that could be applied now?
Well, I think that it's very important to recognize that what we did took 16 years.
Hmm.
We set out, I'd worked with Ronald Reagan starting in 1974 and served with him while he was president from 1980 to 88. I was in the Congress. And literally from the time I was elected in 1978, I'd lost twice in 74 and 76, finally won in 78. We went to work on trying to grow a majority. And it was such a big job, so complicated. We couldn't get it done for 16 years. And what's interesting is we had the first Republican majority in 40 years in the House. But when we finished negotiating with President Clinton, and we went through some very tough fights, including closing the government twice, once for 27 days, people decided we were serious about getting the budget under control, and we were serious about solving the problems. And as a result, we got reelected in 1996. That was the first reelected House Republican majority since 1928. So it was really quite remarkable. And the whole purpose of March to the Majority was to share with this generation the lessons that we learned, both over the 16 years of growing the majority, and then over 4 years of very successful negotiations with Bill Clinton, including the only four balanced budgets in modern times. There's been no other cycle like that. And at the time, we were actually paying down the federal debt, which, by the way, today passed $33 trillion. So your generation is going to have a huge burden of debt, interest to pay. We'll presently be paying more interest on the debt than we pay for national defense.
Yeah, and that's obviously not something that I or my generation is excited about, but I did read the book and I really enjoyed it and learned a lot, especially someone who didn't live through it. So it was really, really cool to read the book and learn a lot, and I would recommend it to anyone listening. It really is a great book to kind of have a lens into the past, but also see how to apply it to the future, because we are in a situation where it's seemingly hopeless, but there is hope if we come together and we, try to move back towards success. So I guess looking into 2024, what do the Republican candidates need to do to be successful? What lessons could they learn?
Well, I think, first of all, that we have a project called America's New Majority Project, which people can see if they go to americasnewmajorityproject.com. And there we list, we've been doing polling since 2018. Every 2 weeks, we take a national survey. We have over 100,000 people in our database, and we regularly do focus groups. And I can tell you from my perspective that there are a number of issues that are 70 or 80% issues. And one of the things I learned from Ronald Reagan was to pick issues where the American people are overwhelmingly unified. That's why if you look at the contract with America, every single item in that contract was very popular, 70% or more support. So I would say to Republicans, by January, adopt sort of a miniature platform, no more than 10 ideas that are all in the 70 or 80% range, and campaign on them. Point out what the Democrats have done wrong about 20% of the time, and point out what you'll do right about 80% of the time. And I think Republicans could win an enormous victory in 2024.
I sure hope so, and that is great advice to follow. And just to discuss some of the problems and the root of them that we are facing, you're writing a very insightful column at the American Spectator now, and you just published a piece called American Despotism, where you talked about some of the problems and just the way that the government is heading and the totalitarian attempts that are going on. Can you touch on some of the main points of that and on the realities of what we're facing and on what we're missing when we're focusing on fighting corruption?
Well, what happened for me was I was reading Andy McCarthy's book, Ball of Collusion. McCarthy spent 20 years as a federal prosecutor, prosecuted the terrorist who bombed the World Trade Center the first time in 1993. Has a very good legal mind. And as I read Ball of Collusion, I realized that the problem is much bigger than Joe Biden. The Biden family corruption, as real as it is only like one tree in a forest. But that in fact, there are many, many problems and that they go back a long way. And so I talked with the folks at the American Spectator, and we decided that I would do a series. It'll probably be about 30 articles altogether, starting with the Soviet communist penetration in World War II, where we had probably 500 Soviet agents, some of them very, very high ranking in the United States. And then the gradual growth of radical left wing thinking. And in fact, just before you and I got together by Zoom, I'm working on a chapter which is on the impact of civil rights and what happened in the 1960s and how that affected things. People forget that in the 1960s, at one point, we had about 170 cities that were burning. We had 5 days of riots in Detroit, and the 101st Airborne had to go in to calm the city down. So there are a lot of things going on that we forget. The FBI reported that I think in 1970 and 71, there were 2,500 bombings in the United States. So we've had waves of radicalism before, and what's happened is those folks grew up, raised the generation, the Hillary Clintons, the Barack Obamas, and all the people they brought into government. And so you now have a very radical government that wants to use the power of government to impose on you and me changes we don't want. The exact opposite of Abraham Lincoln's concept of government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So I'm writing this series on American despotism to outline how we got there. I used to be a professional historian, and before I started running for office, and so I put back on my historian hat, and I'm spending a good part of every single day doing research and beginning to write this series that really will help people understand where this started and what it all means.
And the first piece of it was really, really insightful, and I'm looking forward to reading the rest and glad that you're doing it because it's a very big issue that I think a lot of people have trouble narrowing in and figuring out, how did we get here? How did we get to a place where everything's such a mess? Where do we go from here to march back towards success?
Well, I recently wrote a very small paper and said Celebration Day should be July 4th, 2025, not Election Day 2024. We need a very strong transition. We need to bring in the right people. We need to pass the right laws from day one, and hopefully we can uproot the radical left control of the bureaucracies, and we can find a way to get back on the right path, which is to return a lot of power out of Washington back to the American people, to go back to being a country where you really do have the right to pursue happiness and you don't have some bureaucrat defining for you what happiness is. And I think that you have to take this as a serious moment. If we can win decisively next year, a lot of things can fall into place in a way that will be very, very powerful.
Really great points and encouraging ones too, because there is hope if we can focus on those things. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me, and I'd encourage everyone to check out your book and the new column.
It's great to be with you. Thank you.